This is the DOGS program, Defence of Government Schools, and we're here to defend and to promote public education. Today we have a special person who's come in to talk to us, Lara. It looks as if the secularity of our public education system has been undermined fairly substantially in recent years by a group called ACCESS Ministries. And Lara's here to tell you about her experience. Over to you, Lara.
Hello, my name is Lara and I'm the mother of a 6-year-old daughter who attends Williamstown North Primary. She was in prep last year and it was our first year at the school and we were really enjoying our time at the school. But what happened towards the end of last year was during the Christmas time there was a Christmas celebration at the school, but it was being organised by the SRI volunteers. It was actually going to be the only celebration in the school for the students. So in other words, it was just the SRI Christmas celebration or nothing. My daughter didn't participate in SRI, therefore she wouldn't be able to come to the Christmas concert. Parents were told that if they wanted their children to come to the Christmas concert, they could, the ones that weren't in the SRI classes, but they needed to get permission from their parents. We thought about sending her to the Christmas concert because we didn't want her to feel left out. We wanted her to be part of the celebrations with her friends. But when we saw the program for the celebration, we were quite shocked at the content. It was quite clearly evangelical. There were several songs that the children were taught to sing. They were called My God is So Big. Another one was called Creation Rap, which is about creationism. And my daughter's class was being taught to sing the Butterfly Song, which is another devotional song. Now, none of these songs have anything to do with Christmas, but they have everything to do with following Jesus and God. There were also several Bible readings that were going to take place and a minister's sermon, and the children were going to be blessed by the minister. And we just thought that that was inappropriate for our child, so we thought that she wouldn't be involved. The children that were to go to the SRI concert were told by the class teacher that they were allowed to wear Christmassy gear on their heads, but the ones that weren't going weren't allowed to. Therefore, my daughter became upset because she wasn't allowed to join in the dressing up. And not only that, but it also highlighted the fact, it highlighted visually to everyone in the class which children were going to the concert and which weren't going to the concert. So that was another thing that upset our daughter. And she had to wait with, I think, 3 others in her class in a separate classroom while the other kids walked to the church. It was actually being held at the local church down the road. She had to wait with 2 or 3 others while they went. I think it lasted for about an hour or so, hour and a half, and then they came back, and she just felt totally left out. And the children that went to the concert were also given Bibles as gifts by the minister. And this angered us, and we actually went to the group Fearless for Help before the concert, who contacted Susie O'Brien from the Herald Sun. She actually agreed to attend the concert, which she did, and after that she wrote an article in the Herald Sun about it, describing what went on, and I think the headline was Creationists have hijacked Christmas at our schools. Now, this hasn't only happened at my school, this happens in hundreds of schools around Victoria. And sometimes the parents aren't told that the children are being removed from the school grounds and taken to the local Christian school. ACCESS always try to get the children to their venue of choice, which is the Christian school. Not only that, but it's actually against the Department of Education rules to remove the students from the school grounds for SRI. It says in the guidelines on their website that children must not be removed from the school grounds for SRI unless there has been given minister approval to do so. So not only is it, in my view, morally wrong what's going on here, it's actually illegal in our view. I've written to my principal several times about this, more than one occasion, and he's argued that they're not actually learning about SRI, so therefore it doesn't count.
What we seem to be dealing with here is what I would call consumer religion. Lara has brought in some raps, very interesting music, and it's very subtle. It's subtle. I could only call it indoctrination. Subtle and not so subtle. Now, that's fine if a parent is a Christian of a certain sort. But large numbers of the parents in our state schools, our public schools, are not of this very particular persuasion. Large numbers of our parents have no religious belief at all. They are humanists, or they may be Muslim, or they may be Hindu, or they may be Jewish. They may not, in one of the songs, have been too happy about Christ being called an Israelite. It can only, in fact, what I'm arguing is that this kind of activity, and particularly taking children out of the school to another venue, it could only be very offensive to a large number of public school parents. It's not what public education is about. It cuts across completely what public education should be about. Education is about teaching children to think, teaching children to learn. What their parents decide should be their belief system is in fact a very personal matter. So it's a very worrying situation, very worrying indeed. And we're very grateful to you for coming in and just telling us where you're coming from. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
Just what happened to my daughter last week. So this year, what's happened is her class was given their first, and because we've opted her out, her and a number of other students, actually half the students in her class aren't doing it this year, which is a high number, which is pleasing. They were removed from the class and put somewhere else to be supervised. What happened after that was, during the course of the day, her good friend Zoe, who's also in grade 1, came up to her with a printed note that looked very much like a party invitation. It had pictures of balloons on it, and it said, "Dear Leah, you are special to God and me, from Zoe." And anyway, when I picked her up from school that evening, she handed it to me, and at first I thought it was a party invitation, but then when I read it, I was quite surprised what was written on it. And I said, "Where did you get this?" And she said, "Oh, my friend Zoe." And I knew that Zoe does SRI, so I knew this must have been some class activity that was done during SRI. And then later in the car, when we were talking about God, my daughter asked about what does it mean that God thinks I'm special. And I really didn't know what to say to that. We have spoken to God about God to her. We certainly don't want her to be ignorant about religions, but it just put me in a situation where I wasn't sure how to answer that at that point. And I felt that because I had opted my daughter out of SRI, I thought it was unacceptable that religious notes should make their way to my daughter during school time on school grounds. I thought that was totally inappropriate and very unprofessional of the volunteer, that it could not be, that she could not see that this could happen if it was part of a class activity. And was it actually directed to the children to write notes to their friends and then distribute them in the playground? These are the sort of things that we've found these volunteers do. Actually, they use these tricks, if you will, to get their message out of from the classroom into the wider school community.
It's called marketing the brand. It's
Yes.
a marketing, and our schools more and more are being put into the marketplace, but now they're in the marketplace of religion. They should be in the marketplace of ideas.
Yes, that's right. And what if this note had have been given to a Jewish child or a
Yes.
Hindu child or a Muslim child? For instance, we have a lot of Indian families at our school who I know are Hindu, and I would imagine that this would be quite upsetting to their parents. And, I mean, it's just not acceptable in my view that this has happened. And that was the first lesson for the year. So, and it was actually part of the curriculum. It was a class lesson. So it wasn't something that the volunteer decided to do herself. It was part of the ACCESS Ministries lesson. So it's reasonable to assume that my daughter wasn't the only one that received this note from her friend. But I'm not aware whether others have received it or not.
Now, you've contacted Ferris. Have you found them helpful
Yes,
with your
very.
concerns?
Yes, I have. And I've actually become quite active with the group now. And we're doing a number of things at the moment. We've obtained a report from Professor Marion Maddox from the Macquarie University. She's done a professional review of the ACCESS Ministries Religion in Life curriculum, and she's supplied us with a scathing report, in fact, of their curriculum. If I can just read out part of the report.
That's very interesting because she herself is a Christian.
Yes, she's a member of the Uniting Church.
Yes.
Yes.
And she writes very widely on religion in Australia, so that is very interesting that she's questioning
Yes.
the ACCESS Ministries. Okay,
So this is a very credible review. Just what she's written here is a high proportion of ACCESS's lesson materials goes beyond imparting knowledge of biblical allusions or cultural references, as claimed by ACCESS, and is directed towards encouraging children to develop a personal faith. There is no difficulty in saying that this material amounts to preaching the gospel to participating students. I address below the extent to which the aims of the lessons could be said to be converting children from one belief to another. And then in the report she goes on to explain in more detail her findings. And that review is actually published on the Ferris website at the moment, and anyone can look at it. And we're actually encouraging parents to submit it to their school councils.
This is the job of the church. This is the job of the religious men. They're not doing it in their churches, so now they want to do it to children who are easily influenced. This is not education. It cuts across the separation of religion and the state, and it's offensive to obviously large numbers of people. The public school is not the place for this kind of activity. And in the end, they'll cause problems. In the end, it will be anti-Christian from some point, Christian's point of view. That would be the position I would take, that you should have a separation of religion and the state, with God and Jesus Christ as a personal one. It's not something that you impose on young children. It's for the parent to talk about with their children, if they have a very firm belief system, in the same way as at a certain point you want to discuss this in your own way with your child. It's too personal to be used in this way. It causes immense trouble. In the end, it causes civil strife. History has proved this. And this is why the dogs are very strong about the separation of religion and the state. There was hundreds of years of civil war. If you go to Syria right now and Lebanon, there is trouble between the Shia and the Sunni Muslims, just over probably the way they pray and what they believed with Muhammad and his grandchildren. It's not a place. I mean, we have to really think very strongly about these principles which were hammered out in our culture through the Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th century, after 400 years of terrible civil wars, and we're now in danger of losing it. You give up on the principle and you get into these very offensive situations. And it's bad for religion. It's going to be very bad for these people. They're going to get themselves a bad name this way, and it's very sad. Yes,
many religious leaders have actually spoken out against ACCESS Ministries, saying that they don't speak for them, and they would like them removed from the school as well. Ferris would like to see all religions taught in an educational way in public schools, not by volunteers that only receive 8 hours of training before they're allowed to go into our schools. We don't feel that's the best way, and we can see what's happening as a result. These people are usually fundamentalist evangelicals, and they've got an agenda when they go into schools.
Oh, they feel a burden on themselves to evangelise. I think you have to understand this. It's a question as to whether or not the school is the place to do this. The problem is that they're not succeeding outside, and because they've wanted so much money for their own schools, they're not succeeding in their actual churches. The churches, people are walking away. And of course we've seen how the Roman Catholic Church, by protecting its priests and so on, is a bit on the nose at the moment.
Yes.
But, it's a very sad situation indeed, that you are in this position and you have to fight for what in fact should just be your rights in a public education system.
Well, it's not just me. Ferris also receives regular emails from other parents in trouble over this, asking for advice and our help, and we're happy to give it always and provide accurate information about the legalities of things and how they can go about contacting their principal and their school council, and how we can work together to make a change. It's hard, but we're determined to change this policy and remove these people from our schools.
I feel really bad for your daughter. We know how children can be cruel to that physical separation. That to children that means a lot. That's enough excuse to have a pick at someone. Just you're not allowed to wear a hat, or you're not allowed. That's enough reason for children to start picking on each other, and for that to be instigated by someone who's purporting to be a spiritualist.
Well, if I could just give you an example of what happened last year. Towards Christmas, the volunteer gave out candy canes to the SRI students in front of the non-participating students, and then the SRI students walked back into the classroom and waved their candy canes at my daughter and the others and said, "Look what we got, look what we got," and my daughter started crying. And to them, they look at the volunteer as a teacher. They don't know the difference. It's a person in authority, and they see that they've been discriminated against, and they're confused. They don't understand, why didn't I get a candy cane? And the other children experienced positive discrimination, whereas they were given something that the others weren't. And
when I went to school, we had separate denominational groups, half an hour a week. You went into your own denominational group, and then we compared it all afterwards. And when I was in high school, we had a very nice lady who used to come in. I was given a Methodist upbringing, but we had a whole surge of girls came in when we got this really nice-looking guy. I mean, we all compared notes afterwards, but because in fact we were in a public school, and we had Jewish and Roman Catholic and all sorts of girls, we all compared notes out in the playground. We gave ourselves our own comparative religion, I think, and this was actually regarded as a very personal part of everybody's life. And what we had to do was to respect. We had the main thing that we had to learn, and we were told that we had to learn this, was to actually respect other people's belief systems. That was the fundamental principle, I think, below what used to be the case when you had denominational people coming in for specific reasons. But of course what happened was, because there wasn't any money or status or kudos in this, they ran out of volunteers, or the ministers didn't come in. So now they're doing it this way. It's a very sad situation, I think, and it's actually a very wrong one. It cuts across the principles of public education completely. And I think we'll all strength to your arm.
And it also goes into that, supposed giving of values too. A lot of the private schools, purport to give their children values, and to have a volunteer come in and positively discriminate. It's setting up in the child's mind in a state school that they are better than one of their own peers. And this is again, it goes against the grain of public education, the whole concept of it.
I haven't told you about the OAC Ministries, but I'd like to talk about them. OAC Ministries is another group that operates within public schools. Now, hardly anyone knows about this, because at the moment they're given a back door into our schools through ACCESS Ministries. OAC Ministries stands for Open Air Campaigners. Now, they've been around for a long time, and they are even more evangelical than ACCESS Ministries, if you can believe that. Mm-hmm. At the moment, they conduct religious seminars in hundreds of public primary schools around Victoria by invitation of the SRI volunteers. In some cases, the principals don't even know they're operating in their schools. I know of one case where a principal was unaware that they were in his school. He's now been told. He's furious about it. I can't name names, but I know of a case. So they're coming into schools through the back door. They're operating these religious seminars, which are supposed to be about values, but they're all based on having a Christian faith. For example, one seminar, and this is on their website, says, Sparky is having trouble making the right choices. Learn how God can help us with our decisions. So it would be hard for a child of another religion or no religion to relate to that, or not be made to feel that they should turn to God when in trouble. Now, this group is also very active during school holidays. They hold many school holiday events. They have beach missions, caravan park missions, where they target young children. They set themselves up in places where families gather. And it looks like a typical regular activity for children. Sometimes they use a circus theme, with arts and crafts. They encourage the parents to leave the children in their care for a couple of hours. They even make the parents sign a permission form. I've got a copy of their permission form. Nowhere does it tell the parents that they are a religious group. It's not made obvious to the parents that they're a religious group. So parents are leaving their children with this group without knowing that their children are going to be told about God or what's going on. I've seen a church newsletter where after the event they've described that the children are being told about becoming part of God's family at these events. Now, this is presumably without the parents knowing about it. So they're showing themselves to be predatory and deceptive. Now, these are the same people that are coming into our public-private schools, and last year they visited my daughter's school 3 times, and they visited my school a few weeks ago at Easter and gave a religious Easter seminar. Now, at the moment, really nobody knows about them.
I wonder how many Christian parents, or how Christian parents would feel if the local mullah was doing this in the public school, or if the hairy Krishnas came in and did it, or as actually happened in Footscray, another group, the Steiner School, actually started to take over. They almost took over the whole state school, and the parents in the end had to fight this. It's a and given that the long-term plan is actually to privatise public education, I think that parents like yourself have to be aware that this school might in fact become an appendage to the local Christian school.
I might just point out that the chairman of ACCESS Ministries is Leon Bell, who's the principal at Thomastown West Primary School. So a lot of these people in OAC are actually teachers themselves, but they're obviously very devout Christians who are part of this evangelical religious group, and they've managed to infiltrate our public school system.
I think they've been there for many years, but because of the separation of religion from the state, you haven't had this situation. They have respected people's belief, or it's just built in to the institutional requirements. Yes, I'm very glad that people are waking up. We had to fight this battle back in the 1970s, and we won then. But in the 1990s and the 21st century, this has happened. I don't think people realise that this has been going on in the same way as state aid has been going on since the 1960s, certainly since the 1970s, where in Victoria there was a report known as the Russell Report, where when the voluntary denominational groups collapsed, they wanted actually to make a religion, this kind of religious knowledge, part of the general curriculum, and we fought it. And then back in 2005 they changed the Education Act, and the Dogs had a full-page advertisement in the paper about it, trying to warn people that the secular nature of our public education was in trouble, that the separation of religion from the state was being very thoroughly undermined by people within the education department and by people like the ACCESS Ministries. But it has been a long battle. And what interests us at the Dogs is that the parents are starting to wake up as to what has been done to the secularity provision of our public education system. The so-called Reform Act of 2005-6 was a key point in this battle. So personally, I find it very interesting that
Yes.
you're here
Thank
on
you.
the Dogs program telling us your own personal story. You have been offended, and this is a thing that is very worrying for the public education system, which should be accessible to all and offensive to none, particularly in the matter of very personal belief systems, of which there are a great many in Australia at the moment. If we are going to integrate our children and teach them mutual respect for each other and their parents and their belief systems, if we're going to have a genuinely multicultural Australia, then this is a very worrying situation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've had a lot to say. Is there anything more you'd like to say, Lara?
Just another way of looking at SRI, it actually takes up 3% of the curriculum. The curriculum's also, at the moment, very overcrowded as it is. Our children aren't doing as well as they could be in schools. Julia Gillard's trying to improve the way school children learn in our public school system with the Gonski review and things like that. But these people are given access to the children half an hour a week, which equates to 3% of the curriculum time. So we feel that that's a waste of the precious curriculum time, and that's another good reason to get it out of our schools.
I know that in some state schools the principals and others feel the same way, and even some of the people who want to teach the children, or who have taught the children over the years, the different priests and ministers and so on, and they think that the answer to this problem, the curriculum problem, is to actually have an opt-in requirement and have the SRI lessons or religious lessons after school or before school.
Yes.
So that if parents want their children to mix with children of a similar faith and have religious instruction, yes, if it's going to be done in the school grounds, it should be done after school, and it should be an opt-in thing, so that the principle of open to all and offensive to none can be preserved. It's the only way forward for many principals and parents.
Yes, Ferris does support that view, and that would also remove the matter of discrimination against children that aren't participating in SRI, because they wouldn't have to be taken out of the classes and separated from their friends in the class if it was made before or after school. So that would be a positive step forward in our view.
Lara, thank you so much for coming in. It's been wonderful to hear your point of view, and that's what 3CR is for. You're not going to read about this in the paper. You're only going to hear it on 3CR, so thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been great coming.